You are listening to When the Bell Breaks podcast. This is your host, Alexis Aralyn. Today's guest is Angie Hawkins, and she's got some stories to share with y'all. So we're going to get right into it. Angie, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here?
Yes. Hi, Alexis. Thank you for having me. I am here because I have been estranged from my mom for over 3 years. And I know it has become more popular in recent times, but 3 years ago, it was not a popular thing. So it was a very difficult decision. I'm sure it's still difficult now, but I do think it's talked about more, which I love. And that's why I was interested in having this conversation with you.
Well, you're lucky because When the Bell Breaks podcast happens to be the first podcast that was ever launched with the focus of family estrangement as the topic. So you came to the right place. Exactly why I started my show because there was nobody talking about it. Estrangement existed. It's always existed, but nobody's
Yeah.
really talked about it. And so that's why I made the podcast. So if you're listening for the first time, you're listening to the first estrangement podcast ever. You found it. You found us. Even my own estranged family found the show. So there's a little fun fact. So that's funny. But on this show, we want to hear more about Angie. So, Angie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and a little bit about your story?
So I am Angie Hawkins, the Inner Glow Coach. I help women stop chasing love and approval outside of themselves and start radiating confidence from within. And that's actually part of my story. And I'll start from the beginning. Usually, the way I describe it, I was raised in a household. Both of my parents were emotionally unavailable. And that is true. But to peel back the layers a little more on that, my dad was emotionally unavailable because he was an alcoholic. He was very passive. My parents didn't get divorced until I went to college. So he was physically present in the house, but it was like he would leave in the morning, go to work, and then come home from work, sit on his recliner, drink beer until he went to bed. So he just really wasn't involved in the family at all. He was just physically there. And my mom, on the other hand, she was very enmeshed and controlling, which is also a different form of emotional unavailability because she ran the house like a business. It was like, you do this, you do that. Like it was just very formal and structured. There was never hugs or I love yous or just any real connecting types of conversations. I have a sister, we have different dads, but she grew up in the same home, but there were 4 of us, and it was just like we were all just very emotionally disconnected. I spent a lot of time in my room to myself. Another thing about my mom and her emotional unavailability, she was angry all of the time. And I think part of that had to do with the situation with my dad, but she just took it out on everybody. So, a huge part of my role in the family growing up was walking on eggshells, trying not to make my mom mad. So, I was always like the people pleaser and always wanting to appease her and make sure I was doing the things that wouldn't make her angry. And, that of course doesn't work. And another thing, yeah, because she would still get mad and
Yeah.
we would still get yelled at. But it does create a sense of safety somewhat to like have that hypervigilance. And another thing was my mom was extremely critical. And it was like with things that we did, hobbies, things like that. But she was also very critical of my appearance. Like I'm talking not even just like clothes and hair, she was extremely critical of my face. I have very early memories because I hit puberty early. I think I got my period when I was like 10. So, of course, like I started getting zits and stuff. She would like pick my face until it bled because she like couldn't stand me having like any imperfections on my face. And that's just such a vulnerable thing to be criticized about. And that
Yeah.
happened like, over the course of my entire life. So
Yeah.
that
Did you ever feel like, gosh, even my own mom doesn't like my face and it doesn't have confidence in me?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because she criticized me about everything. It wasn't just my face, but I think that was the most vulnerable thing because your face is what you present to the world.
And at
So
that age too, you're just going out into the world and being aware of what everybody thinks of you all of a sudden, that is a very vulnerable time to have your mom doing
Well, and
something.
especially something I don't even have control over. I mean, you do somewhat, like you can wash your face and have certain kinds of hygiene, but when your
Yeah,
hormones are doing
hormones.
something, yeah, that you
Right.
cannot control, like, so it was something like I had a lot of shame around that because it's like I didn't really know how to handle it. And I would I would obsess about my own face. So and I started picking my own face, which was like a whole different issue. It turned into like an obsession that I had to get over in adulthood. But yeah, that was like a really vulnerable thing. But it just like fed to all the shame. And I developed this belief that I didn't deserve to be loved because I had both of these parents who weren't even emotionally invested in me and who I was as a person. They didn't care about my hobbies or interests. They just cared, like my mom just cared about making sure food was on the table, whatever. My dad didn't really care about much, and that's just how it was.
When did you become aware of that sort of dynamic? Like, when did you start to be aware that, oh, this situation that I'm in is kind of messed up?
That's a good question. Even at a young age, I think I felt something was off because, you watch TV and I knew like sitcoms and stuff were fictional, but there
Right.
was still a sense of like family and love and
Yeah.
togetherness. And I'm like, like
Like every TV show was like that. And you're like, why is our house not like that? Like at all.
but I think I started getting more of a sense probably around middle school because that's when you start going to your friends' homes and kind of being more aware of the dynamic of their families. And because I remember one of my really good friends, she had two sisters. So there were three daughters, but like her and her parents, like they would always like kiss and hug each other and tell each other they loved each other. And I'm like, that's interesting because like we don't do this.
And
Or
you're
I had
just standing
another
there, hi.
yeah, I had another friend,
Yeah.
her parents were, like, actually, physically affectionate towards each other, like, they weren't, like, gross about it, but,
Yeah.
they would, like, hug and kiss or whatever, and I also found that very interesting, so, probably, like, a general awareness started in, like, preteens, early teens.
I'm just absorbing all of this right now because it's like it reminds me a lot of whenever I listen to others, it does bring me back to like my own kind of that whole like era of my life when
Yeah.
yeah, you start going to other people's houses and you start to actually witness what it's like in other people's houses. It's like, "Oh, this is kind of normal. They do this too," or or "That's not normal in my house," or yeah, like my parents, they whenever my mom would pick up my dad from work, they would give each other a little peck, and that was it. My parents didn't hold hands.
See, my
You
parents
never
didn't even
saw them
peck.
hug each other. Yeah, it was just a peck, and it was like a habitual
Oh, just kind of
that was
going through
it.
the motion, yeah.
Yeah, no emotion, and it all I don't know. And it was like whether or not they were angry at each other, they still pecked each other like that.
Oh,
But
that's
I was always
nice.
like, that's just there wasn't really any love there. It was just like a habitual thing. And, I always was thinking like, yeah, like, do they actually do they like each other? And my dad didn't drink, but he did the same thing. He'd come home, put his feet up, and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, my mom was super enmeshed in all of our lives, wanting to
Okay.
control our lives and dictate whatever we were doing. So I'm just checking all the boxes here. Like I experienced a lot of that too. So when you became an adult, what was your relationship like with your parents? Like let's say like fast forward when you move out of the house or like did things change for you? Like when did things change for you when when you're like, "Oh, I'm mom and dad's kid. This isn't exactly going well," to like, "I don't really like this anymore."
So it did change when I went to college
Okay.
because there was kind of a turning point in high school
Okay.
where things became even more aware to me. So my senior, actually, it would have been my junior year of high school. I I'm not sure how it started, but anyway, I became anorexic. And in hindsight, I think it was a way for me to control something because I felt so out of control. I think there were other things going on. I just don't know because I don't remember. But
Mhm.
anyway, my family. we like to sweep things under the rug. So the summer before my senior year, I think I weighed like 80 or 85 pounds.
Mm.
But we didn't talk about it, which was fine with me because I just wanted to live in my own world.
Right,
I
you're like,
didn't
"We
want
don't need anybody picking at this like they picked at my face." Like,
yeah, like
yeah.
yeah, and it's also interesting, right, though, because my mom would be very critical about some things, but other things she just wanted to sweep under the rug. Like, there was a reason why she didn't wanna, like, call out the elephant in the room on this one. I guess needless to say, I was pretty miserable because of my lifestyle of basically starving myself, and I had just started my senior year of high school, and one day, my mom approached me and she finally brought it up. And she was like, "Hey, I scheduled a therapy appointment, for you because I want you to gain weight or like work on this issue." But in my mind, I was like relieved because I didn't necessarily want to gain weight, but I was miserable the way I was. And also, there was like this sense of relief like, oh, she really does care.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have no idea why she said this to me. The reason why she wanted me to go to this therapy appointment is because my friend's parents had said something to her about my weight and it was embarrassing for her.
Oh.
So, yeah. So,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
so
Jesus.
she never brought it up because it was embarrassing.
Oof.
And yeah, so that was kind of like a knife to the heart because I was kind of excited, like, oh, she actually cares. And then I was like, oh, she just cares about the facade. She was so embarrassed over this because my senior year of high school, I had my own car. I drove myself to school, but she was so determined that I had to go to these therapy appointments. She would take off work, come pick me up from school, drive me to the therapist, and then drive me back to school to ensure that I would go to these therapy appointments. So, anyway, I went to a few appointments and it comes out pretty much immediately. My dad's an alcoholic, all the stuff going on at home. And the therapist, I don't even know if this is, I don't know if legal is the right word because I was under 18, but my mom was in the waiting room because she was driving me to these appointments. And the therapist was like, "Is it okay if we bring your mom in the room and talk about this?" And I was like, "Yes." So the therapist brought my mom in and she was like, "Hey, there's this problem with your husband drinking and this, whatever. Are you willing to work on this as a family?" I don't remember what my mom said, but I do remember that she was driving me back to school and she was like, "Do you want to keep going to therapy?" And
She was already like, "Let's stop this." Like, I
yeah, and I'm like 17 and I thought like therapy was so awkward and I actually liked school. I was a straight A student and this was taking me out of school. So she was like, "Do you want to keep going to therapy?" I was like, "Nope." She was like, "Okay, you don't have to go anymore." But, the problem was still there, right? Like, I
right,
still
yeah.
only weighed 85 pounds. It was my senior year of high school. I know I keep repeating myself, but this is why it's important
No, it is.
because I had been waiting for 18 years to go away to college and move out of that house, and she knew that. So she was like, "If you don't gain weight, you can't move out and go to college." So fear is an amazing motivator because I immediately like went to the store and bought all this junk food and I'm not even exaggerating. I shoved my face for like a month because I'm like I am gaining weight and I'm moving away to college. So I'm not exaggerating. I gained like 30 pounds in a month. But then you have like the flip side of health effects. Like I was sweating at night like my metabolism was all wonky, but then she would get mad at me because I was like sweating at night. She's like, "Why are you sweating at night?" And like it turned into this whole thing.
Is there
So,
sugar in my body and my body's not used to it and I'm trying to
yeah, so like she was like I did what she wanted and then I was
Yeah.
still getting criticized. And so my point is I hated my parents, and I remember I think at one point I told her I hated her because it's just like I was so miserable and she just kept nagging me and like feeding into it and it's like just I couldn't wait to move out and go to college. But being that age, I wasn't really thinking about what that meant to move out and go to college because yes, I did move out and go to college, But
Haven't had time to think about that actually because you've been so overwhelmed with
yeah,
yeah, I get
I
it.
wonder why I wasn't thinking about it.
It's like,
But
this is the next step. Let's go. You
but
know?
what didn't occur to me was that I was still financially dependent on my
Right.
parents.
The money thing.
So, yeah, and again, like, I didn't think that through. I thought I was gonna be free, I could do whatever I want. So
Yeah.
no, like, I still had my mom nagging me. I think the worst part was because you asked me about my relationship with my parents as an adult, so I know that was the long-winded answer, but it started with, like, that deep hatred of my parents when I was in high school. I went to college, and I remember my parents bought me a cell phone, so this is gonna show my age. I graduated
We're
high school.
probably the same age.
Okay. I graduated high school in '98.
Okay,
So
2000.
okay,
Yeah.
so
I
back
got my
then
first phone in 2001.
okay, so that was my point because cell
Yeah.
phones back then were for emergencies, like, you didn't text, you weren't, like, calling all the
Yep, they were
time.
like this big and
Yep.
yeah.
Like, yeah, you didn't want to, like, carry it around with you because it was just like a heavy brick. But
Yeah.
my parents and they were also cheap. So my parents got me a cell phone. I think it was $30 a month or whatever what it was back then, but they paid for it,
Uh-huh.
but it was for me to call them. And because I moved in a different area code. So that was another thing when everyone had landlines and you called different area codes, it was long distance.
Yep.
So they got me the cell phone. So like with the plan, you could call in the evening and weekends and it was like
Yep.
free because it was part of the plan. So I remember, but keep in mind when I lived at home, I never talked to my parents. They never talked to me. We never talked
Right.
about anything. So I went away to college and like 2 weeks went by and I didn't call them. So my mom calls me one day, like all pissed off. She's like, why haven't you called us? Blah, blah, blah. She was like, you need to call us every single week. And she was like, that's why we bought you this phone. So that was the condition of them paying for my phone was that I had to call them every week. So in college as an adult, and I actually did this up until like my 30s. Yeah, through my 30s. But I would call them every week only out of, like, guilt and obligation, even after they stopped paying for my cell phone bill, just because it's like that's what they wanted me to do. We were still disconnected, and my mom would always just talk about herself. My dad, fortunately, found it just as uncomfortable as I did, so we would usually only talk for maybe, like, 5 or 10 minutes, and it would be done, but, like, with my mom, it was this big ordeal because it's like I had to call her, but it was just for her to talk and not give a shit about what I had to say. So the dynamic changed because, I went through college, I graduated college, I got a job, and I was honestly, I don't know how, I think maybe it was my friends or something. It definitely was not my parents, but I started to become more emotionally mature. And I started to feel guilty about not having a relationship with my parents.
Mhm.
So I actually started doubling down and like trying to have connecting conversations with them. And my mom started basically relying on me for her emotional needs and treating me like this is how I describe it. As an adult, she treated me like an emotional support animal. Like if I had an issue and came to her, like she didn't want anything to do with it because it was upsetting to her. But if she needed to vent or dump or whatever, like she can't had to come to me. And if I didn't want to listen, too bad. Because if I tried to set a boundary, she thought I was being mean or whatever. So I became the people pleaser and was like, fine, I'll just let her vent, not realizing how exhausting and honestly, in hindsight, traumatic being an emotional caretaker is to a parent. So that actually went on for probably about 20 years, I hate to say. But with my dad, what happened with him, I'll give my dad's story arc because that's pretty short and sweet. So I was calling him every week, trying to establish this relationship, but with my dad, it was like I was the only one putting in the effort. And I was living in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I wanted to move to Chicago. And my dad knew this because I was interviewing for jobs, I was looking for jobs. So finally, I got a job offer in Chicago, and I was so excited, and I called my dad and I told him I was moving to Chicago. He totally rained on my parade. He's like, "You're gonna hate it there. You're not gonna have enough money, blah, blah, blah," all the stuff. And I was so heartbroken. And that's actually when I wouldn't say I went no contact with my dad, but from that moment on, the only time I remember initiating contact with him was right before he died, because he got sick like a year and a half before he died, and I only found out through my mom, and so I called him to see how he was doing, but it was just like another, like, weird, awkward conversation. But from that moment on, I was like, "I can't emotionally invest in this because he just doesn't even give a shit or doesn't care." So for, like, 10 years, we barely talked, and I only would see him, like, once or twice a year when I went home for the holidays,
Mhm.
and he passed away pretty unexpectedly, and so I had so much guilt, like, it makes me wanna cry right now. I ended up I went to a spiritual medium after he died because I had so much guilt. I was like, "Oh my god, he hates me. We didn't have a chance to have a conversation about this." But I went to the spiritual medium, and I think that's more accepted now, but again, this was, like, 2017, it wasn't really accepted, so I felt so
Right.
gross and creepy, like, going to a medium, but I was like, "I have to know if he's mad at me." And so I went to this medium, and she, like, basically was like, he understands, and, he had his addictions because he was also a smoker, and I think he was depressed. Like, he had, when you're on earth, you have all these, like, meat suit issues, and when you're on the other side, you're just this pure soul. So with my dad, I've actually, like, become best friends with him in spirit because, like, I'm able to see who he is, because he was masked by all his addictions in human form. So that has actually turned into a very special relationship, and I'm, like, so happy about that. But my mom, um it, like, progressively got worse, like, as I became her emotional support, and especially, like, as I tried to set boundaries with her, because it got to the point where she was, like, emailing me all of the time, she was calling me when I was at work, and I would try to tell her, like, "I'm, like, busy at work, I can't be talking on the phone," and then she would get mad and tell me that I was being mean and blah, 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 and it became a lot, but I was still in that people pleaser mode where it's like I'm just trying to appease her and do the bare minimum to, like, not rock the boat. So it was like on the surface, it, like, seemed like a good relationship, but it was like me maintaining it. Like, she was just like, "I'm gonna do whatever I want, and you need to just conform to whatever I'm doing." So it was so exhausting on my end. And in 2018, I moved from Chicago to Hawaii. And when I told my mom I was moving, it was basically the reenactment of the conversation with my dad about Chicago. She was like, "Well, why would you want to move there? Blah, 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 blah." Oh, and she was like, "I'm not going to visit you because that's not a place that I really want to visit." Like, all this
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it was still heartbreaking, but because I had been through it, I think it was a little bit less traumatic than the conversation with my dad. And but when I moved, she became even more needy on me. So, but because of the physical distance, I felt more empowered to actually set a boundary. And I remember the day I called her because I was still calling her weekly at that point. And I called her one day, or yeah, one week. And I was like, you know, we really don't have much to talk about on a week to week basis. So I'm just going to start calling you once a month. Or I can't remember what I told her, but it was basically, I'm not calling you every week anymore. And I didn't go into the details because the longer version was was one sided. She would always just talk about herself. She never really cared about what I was doing. She would. Because honestly, when I would talk, I'm not even exaggerating. She would yawn loudly while I was talking. She would interrupt me while I was talking and then start talking about herself. And it's like, why am I even here? Like, it was that bad. She just didn't even care. Or if I would tell her something and she listened, she wouldn't remember. So it's like, I'd never understood the point of me talking when we talked because it's just like, I'm not even here, basically. My mental health issues really deteriorated in 2020, it was definitely the culmination of my mom issues. There was like the residual grief of my dad, because that year was bad because I also went through a bad breakup. Like, and there was just like a 2-year period where I was just like eating shit every single day. And you just kind of get to a point where that becomes a lot. And so in 2020, I intentionally overdosed on my anxiety medication, and I spent a day and a half unconscious in my bathroom. I spent another day and a half in the hospital, and I obviously survived. And after surviving, I was like, "Okay, I I wanna live my life differently," because I realized, like, I had been people pleasing and doing all these things, and I was like, "I wanna get help, and I wanna get help the right way." So I hired a coach, and I started working on myself. But my point is, I never told my mom because I was really fragile in, like, the weeks and months after I got out of the hospital, meaning any major event could have made me attempt again, like, because life was really fragile.
Yeah,
So,
you were
if
protecting yourself.
yeah, so if I would have called my mom, she would have gotten angry, she would have, made it about her somehow, and I already knew I emotionally could not handle that, and I knew that it would put me at a huge risk of taking my own life again, so it was out of my own emotional and physical safety. So I didn't tell her. But also during this time, I had this idea for a book because, you go on social media and everyone has their highlight reels and how like perfect and happy their life is, especially families. And then even in real life, everyone's putting on their happy face and pretending everything's fine. So I'm like, what if I wrote a book about my life and all the shitty things that happened? Because we're not talking about that, Like, let's
Right?
just talk
Let's do
about it.
something different.
Yeah, so I wrote a book. It's called Running in Slippers, and it's about my childhood. It basically starts the year my dad died. It starts with my dad dying and takes you through like my overdose, everything. And it's all the shitty things. And I even have like flashbacks to my childhood and stuff. So, in writing this book, I did cover my childhood because that's part of my story, right? So, I was like, now would be a good time before I publish it to like ease into these conversations with my mom. So, I had a few conversations where I was like, I'll take part accountability. I was pretty vague. I was like, hey, I'm writing a book. So she didn't give a shit. She just went on. She's like, "Oh, whatever," and started talking about herself. And I tried
Right.
to bring it up several times. And I remember the last time I brought it up, again, she just like didn't care and went on talking about herself. And it pissed me off so much. I'm like, "Fine, you're going to find out about the book when it gets published, right?" So that's exactly what happened. She didn't find out about it until it got published. Oh, and then she got pissed because one of my
You didn't
cousins
know
saw,
about it?
yeah, one of my cousins saw on Instagram and told my mom, and she was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, "I did. You didn't give a shit." And she was
Right?
like, "Well, yeah, yeah." So that was a whole thing. But anyway, so my mom read the book, and oh my god, I don't even know.
Let me guess, she picked that apart too.
Oh yeah. So this is leading up to the estrangement because after she read the book, we had 3 conversations that were extremely circular. So, I don't remember all the details, but I do remember. So, for example, I wrote about, how I went to therapy in high school for being anorexic, and it was only because she was embarrassed. I wrote about that in the book. And she was like, "Well, I was embarrassed." And I'm like, "I know, that hurt my feelings. That was the point."
Yeah.
Um, so, like, I understand you were embarrassed, and I'm just telling you how hurtful that was. And she, like, acted like she was the victim, like, "But I was embarrassed." And I'm like, "Okay." And then because in the book, I mentioned how in our household, like, we didn't hug, there were no I love yous. And she was trying to tell me that apparently there was this book written in the 90s by like a family therapist or whatever that said, like, "Oh, you should tell your kids that you love them. You should hug them." And she was like, "Well, that wasn't written until the 90s." And I was like, first of all, why do you need a book to tell you that? Second of
right?
all, I didn't move out of the house until 1998, so I don't know at what point in the 90s this book was written, but I feel like there was plenty of time to read and implement. But she acted like it's the book's fault that like that did not happen in our household. We're taught to protect our physical safety. So from a very young age, like look both ways before you cross the street. Like we're taught all these things to protect our physical safety, but I don't think we're taught the same things about our emotional safety. And I think that's where all the backlash from estrangement comes from because people like that's just not part of society for whatever reason. So my advice to anyone is protect your emotional and physical safety as if your life depends on it because it does. And I don't give a shit what anyone says anymore. I have realized like who is safe to talk to it about and not. But if someone wants to criticize me for protecting my emotional safety, I really don't give a shit. That would be like criticizing someone for wearing a seatbelt or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so
I also think it's funny. I mean, there's so many similarities between you and I. We both were like, well, people pleasers. Mom doesn't like us. Mom criticizes us. There's no resources for these problems. Well, let's create one. And then, what? You didn't tell me about it.
yeah,
It's
I
like we
know.
tried talking to you for years about this stuff. You had to write a book, and I had to launch a podcast. That's, in order for for us to be able to talk about this stuff. So anyway, real quick, everybody, if you want to know more about When the Bell Breaks podcast, you can visit WTBBpod.com. And before we go, Angie, can you please tell us where everyone can find out more about you and your book?
Yes, my website is runninginslippers.com, which is also the name of my book. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and audiobook, and I am the narrator of the audiobook. And there's also information on my coaching program, which is called Shine from the Inside. So if you are also a people pleaser, I can help with that.
Awesome. Great stuff. If you would like to be a guest on When the Bow Breaks podcast, doors always open. You can email us at wtbbpodcast@gmail.com. So anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you, Angie, for coming on the show.
Thank you.